I'm attempting to complete every single GameCube game, and I'm using a random number generator to pick the next game. Last episode, we got behind the wheel of a NASCAR and played NASCAR Thunder 2003, and in this episode, we're unlocking the Wings of Our Heart and playing Baten Kaitos Origins. Baten Kaitos Origins was released on September 25th, 2006, and was developed by Monolith Soft and published by Nintendo. This is our next game that will be broken up into parts, so this won't be the whole game in this video. Before we get started, make sure to like this video because it helps out the channel, and subscribe if you're new so you don't miss any of the future games. Without further ado, this is my experience with Baten Kaitos Origins. We now have permission to catch up with the king. So we have to go all the way through the castle, into the city below the castle, and out the other way past the airship dock. This leads us to a brand new area known as the Cloud Passage, and this place has us running around on clouds that look like cotton candy, just like the ones we've seen in the castle before. This area has a few special things about it, but like most areas in the game, there are a bunch of enemies running around. When we arrive, we realize that we don't have any way to get down to the next level of clouds, so for right now we have to turn back and head to another new area that we just unlocked. When we arrive in this area, we notice that it is directly below the Cloud Passage and is called the Lesser Celestial River. And it is exactly that. It's one massive river that cuts through the area with rocks on both sides of it. We notice that the king is here, and he's using these devices in the area that allow for them to jump up into the clouds to the Cloud Passage. So Saki and the group decide that we are going to have to do the same thing to keep up with the king. If you haven't figured it out yet, this area is connected, and we're able to jump up to one and down to the other to advance further into the dungeon. I really like that these two different dungeons are connected in that manner. Once we get to the Cloud Passage again, we notice that there are a bunch of Imperial soldiers all over the area, and between them and the beasts that live in the area, that's going to be our enemies for this section of the game. Nothing we can't handle, but the Imperial soldiers are going to end up being everywhere in the game moving forward. After a little while, we find ourselves in the Lesser Celestial River, and the king jumps back up to the clouds, but drops an item. Instead of picking it up like a normal person would, Saki uses Magnus here to collect the Royal Mirror. This mirror is the second interesting thing about this area. This mirror lets us move beams of light in the clouds to destroy barriers, so that we can move forward into the clouds. It took me a while to figure it out because it doesn't really show you how it works, and you have to leave the light on the barrier for a minute before anything even happens. So for a while I was confused and didn't understand how it worked. But once I did, we were able to break a barrier and move forward in the area. We come across an area where the only way to get any further is to add more clouds, almost like building a bridge using clouds. This part was when mixing Magnus really came into play. We met a guy that told us the items we needed to create clouds and how many to mix together. When mixing items together, we have to battle enemies to get the process to hurry. This is a little annoying, but a little harmless grinding never really hurts in this game. We're able to mix the perfect clouds, and the people around us hate us because we did it first try and none of them can figure it out. We head back to the missing cloud and we insert our cloud, and we're able to move on. This area has some really interesting things about it, and I think it ends up being one of the better designed dungeons in the game. We finally arrive in the fishing village of Nishira. The first thing we see is that the town is completely filled with Imperial soldiers, and they are patrolling everything outside and inside. The king ends up getting captured by the guards and taken away, and put into a prison airship on the far side of the village. When Sagi and friends make their way inside, they realize that they're going to need to get captured so they can finally catch up with the king and bring them back to the castle. So we get captured and we're escorted by a bunch of soldiers over a bridge, into a building that has no business looking like it does, and finally onto the walkway into the prison ship. After all that work, we finally get to meet the king. The king's name is Ladakon, and we let him know that Jabari's father told us to come talk to them and bring them back to the castle so that we could get support from the kingdom. The king tells us he'll think about it, but for now we have to figure out how to escape from the jail cell and make our way back to the castle. Jabari suggests that we just break down the door with force, But then a voice says, "What's with all these morons thinking we should just break stuff?" and then appears in the middle of the room. This teenager's name is Pololo, and he's one of the king's friends. He's very sneaky and is basically a ninja. He's a really good character and probably my favorite out of this group of kids. Pololo walks over to the door and easily unlocks it. He then tells us that his job is done there and steps aside. The king, now having a way to get out of the jail cell, wants to come up with the perfect plan to take out all the guards, but he needs solid information in order for this to work. So he asks Soggy questions about the amount of guards in each area of the building. It's our responsibility as the player to pick the right answers so that the plan goes well. I really like this part. I don't know if you answer wrong if anything happens because I made sure to get the right answers. So if you know if this changes anything in the game, let me know down in the comments below. Once we answer all of his questions, we can head out of the jail cell and put the plan in motion. This part is really good, and I love that they're able to get themselves out of trouble without us helping them at all. They take out 2 guards by tackling them, and then Jabari hits the last one by throwing a barrel across the room and taking him out. Then the guards downstairs notice us, and he throws barrels down the stairs like we're playing Donkey Kong, and he wipes them out. 2 more guards notice us from downstairs, and Pololo slides down the railing of the stairs and kicks both of them, knocking them both out. This leaves 1 more soldier, and he's trying to activate the machines in the room, but the king drops 1 last barrel from the 2nd floor and drops it on the head of the final soldier, and the room is completely cleared out, and we can continue our escape. This is one of the best thought out things in the game. They came up with a plan, and then made it work out to perfection. This part gets a 10 out of 10 for me. We make it back into town, and we need to make it to the pub because it has a secret pathway to get out of the village. I don't know why we can't just go out of the village the way we came in, but I guess it's part of the story. We need to cut through the houses in the village to make it to the pub, since it's blocked off by all the Imperial vehicles. When we get inside, we're met with resistance, but Jabari pulls out his best WWE dropkick and kicks them through the wall of the house. This is some crazy force. Maybe it does pay off to use force sometimes, even though Pololo doesn't think so. When we get into the pub, we meet the bartender, which is friends with the king and everyone, and we're able to open the secret door on the floor to take the secret pathway. I would think the Imperial soldiers would notice this when patrolling because it stands out a bit. Also, I have no idea how this works because we jump down into this secret passage, but somehow end up in the clouds again. Maybe they cut out part of the travel, but I would have liked this to be explained to me. Anyways, we now need to hurry back to the castle so that we can ready the troops because of the attack from the Empire. But on our way back through the clouds, we meet our buddy Giacomo, and he's dead set on stopping us in our tracks. He has a very large bone to pick with Soggy, and we're going to have to fight him again. I thought this would be much easier this time because I knew how to play the game better, and I was stronger now. But yet again, I struggled with this fight. He's actually harder in this fight than he ends up being in the final fight with him. Yes, we're going to have to fight him one more time after this fight. In this fight with him, the strategy is the same. We need to stay healthy because he can hit us with some crazy powerful attacks. But this time he's brought 2 soldiers with him. They aren't much of a problem, but it takes away turns when we should be attacking him. And if we let them live, then we run into problems with them taking us out when we need to heal. I lost to him 3 times and decided it was time to change up the build of my deck and try a more healing based deck with less attacks. After rebuilding my deck, I was able to beat him first try. Sometimes this game will challenge the strategy that has been working for you the whole game and force you to try different approaches, and I was happy with that. I can't stand when a game becomes too easy and you can just beat it without thinking about it. This makes me disengage from the game and makes me hurry through it. We're able to take him down and we get some good experience. Giacomo is upset that he can't beat us again, and his soldiers guide him away from the fight. Then we get a scene from Rambari showing up in this boat thing. I don't know what this is, but there are what looks like 2 faces on the front of it, and it's pretty scary looking. Who designed this boat? He tells us to get down there, and he'll take everyone back to the castle. Rambari tells everyone that the Imperial forces have headed to the cloud vents, and that the king needs to get back to the castle and figure out a plan for what to do next. And we all head back to the castle. When we arrive back in the throne room, Rambari, Jabari, and the king are trying to figure out what to do about the Imperial forces when Soggy and friends show up and tell them that we want to help and that we can go to the cloud vents and try to clear out the Imperial forces from the cloud vents, and that they can just stay there and ready the forces at the castle. They all agree to this plan, and we're able to head out of the castle through the top of it this time and make our way to a brand new area. This area is called the Cloud Vents, and it's sort of just a cave that has air vents that push a lot of air quickly and can push us to places we don't want to be. Outside of that, the area isn't as well designed as the Cloud Passage and the Lesser River. I understand that they wanted the area to look different, but it doesn't really look like it belongs with everything else on this island. Once we get to the end of the cave, we find that Shanath, Hughes, which is a new person, Nazca, which is also new, and the brother of Hughes, I believe, and Valara are all here setting up machines that look like they're stealing the cloud's energy or something. It's pretty hard to figure out what they're doing, but Soggy and friends show up to rain on their parade. Shanath tells us he doesn't have time for all this and tells Hughes, Nazca, and Valara to take us out. This fight can be challenging at first, but once you figure out the right tactics, it's all smooth sailing from there. When you get into the fight, it seems like it's going to be hard because everyone hits pretty hard. But that's not really the issue. The issue comes with the fact that Nazca will heal them, and all the damage you do is erased. So, when we start the fight, we heal ourselves, and we attack Nazca only. That should be the only goal. Once Nazca is taken down, then you can take on the fight however you please. I took out Nazca first, then Valara, and last I took down Hughes. I feel like Valara hits with larger combos and does more damage, so that's why I went that way with the fight, but either order will work out. If you keep this in mind, this fight shouldn't be all that hard. After the fight, we get a cutscene where Hughes tells Nazca to get the Paramachina, but Gilo steps up and tells Nazca if they move, they're going down. At this exact time, the king, Jabari, Rambari, and Celsica show up. This might be the worst timing ever for this to happen, because everything is about to go into mad chaos. Shanath comes out of nowhere and takes the king hostage, and we're all in a bunch of trouble now. Because we don't want the king to get hurt, Nazca is able to escape and leave to get the Paramachina. Shanath at this point decides that they don't need the king to be alive, and he's just going to stab him with this massive sword. During his speech, Rambari runs and tackles Shanath, freeing the king from his clutches, but in turn ends up with a sword through his stomach. He did his job to protect the king, but now finds himself in a bad place. Shanath stands up and is furious at this point, and decides that he's going to pull out the biggest gun ever from his pocket and shoot him a bunch of times, just to make sure he finishes the job. I like the tension here, but the giant gun is silly to me, and takes away from the scene in my opinion. Rambari ends up dying from this, to no real surprise, and this causes extreme emotion to come out of Celsica, and that turns her into the next Umbra. In the same way as before, this aura shows up around her, and then she turns into a giant cloud of smoke, and comes out as an Umbra. Nazca returns in the Paramachina, and this one just looks like a giant car tank thing, and shoots the Umbra dead as Shanath and company flee from the area. You know what that means. Soggy begins to have one of his famous headaches and passes out during all this excitement. When we come to, we're back in the boat city in the other world, and Soggy just wants to get back to help the king, but for now we're going to have to work with the people here and wait. We have another meeting with everyone, and this time we get a little more information about this world. It's basically the opposite of what is happening in the other world. Wiseman wants everyone to become Magnus and support the magic in the world, and this group is trying to stop that from happening. Seth tells the group that we're going to go to Wiseman directly and confront him, which Thorin doesn't think is a great idea, but is overruled on the issue. The village sees us off as Quist and Steph have one of the most awkward goodbyes ever. She really doesn't want him to go, and shows how worried she is about the idea, but Seth moves on and we're ready to head to meet Wiseman. The area we're heading to is called Kajam, and if you notice right away, it looks like the village that Soggy grew up in, but this one is in good shape and appears newer. I noticed this right away when we entered the area. What is the tie between this world and the world that we live in? If you notice, every person in this village has wings like Spiriters and is able to fly around the town. It's very different than Soggy's world, where being a Spiritor is very rare. Seth tells us that Wiseman is at the manor on the far side of town, and we need to head there. We move through the village and come across the clock tower that is all too familiar with Soggy. But this one is working and is in great shape, not like the broken down one in Sheraton. Millie quickly points this out. Soggy even says that this is Briar Clock, like the exact one from town. But Millie is like, no way, this one looks like it was just built, and the one in Sheraton is broken and destroyed. So Soggy just sort of drops the idea. Once we're done looking around and collecting some items, we head to the far side of town and find ourselves right outside of the manor. The manor has a big crowd of people outside of it, waiting to see Wiseman. Wiseman emerges from the manor, and he's one of the strangest characters in the game. He wears a mask helmet thing that has a galactic look around his face and neck area. I don't know if they're clothes or he's some sort of creature under it. And he also wears a black and white robe. He also has a way in how he speaks. He has a deep voice and talks really slow, and loves to just say some weird nonsense that the village people eat up. They're all sitting around on the ground, and they treat him like he's a god. I feel like he comes off more like a cult leader than anything else, though. He tells them to become Magnus, to become free from the world, and then turns one of the people in the circle into Magnus. It's one of the craziest things ever. The people are willing to throw themselves at him just for a chance to become Magnus. He's some sort of maniac for sure. After that, he speaks about freeing your heart and that you can truly become one with the eternal life and some nonsense like that. This guy is a cult leader, and this isn't the first time that he's been one. He yells that he's a villain. Our team goes inside of the manor, and the first thing we see is the black smoke in the middle between two stairwells, and Seth calls out Wiseman, which then Wiseman comes out of the smoke that's on the stairs, and then he tells us to open our hearts, and then challenges us to a fight once we tell him that we're not going to become Magnus. This giant light comes from his body, and everyone gets ready to fight. Then Soggy has the most well-timed headache, causing him to pass out like always, and we get our normal recap of everything that has happened before we passed out, and we appear back in the cloud vents, with the king and Jabari standing in a face-off with Nazca in that tank. Soggy doesn't think much about it, and we get thrown in the battle with the Paramachina, which we can't do any damage to this thing. The idea in this fight is to hit when you can to wear down some health, and then make sure you stay healthy until we trigger the battle-ending attack from the tank. This is similar to most boss fights in the game when we can't do enough damage to actually take them down. After the attack, the king comes into the battle and tells us to follow him. When we get outside of the battle, they have somehow moved the flow of the cloud vents and is forcing Nazca in the Paramachina to not be able to move, so it can't chase us. I didn't really notice this when I was playing the game, but now that I'm editing the video, I notice how smart of a move this is. The Machina can't go in the other direction, so Nazca would either have to just sit and wait, or get out and abandon the Machina, which you wouldn't want to leave this really powerful Machina with the people that are trying to take you out. It's a small detail, but I think it was done well. Once it happens, the king tells us to retreat from the cloud vents and back to the castle for now, and we'll deal with this later. Once we get back to the throne room, there's a bunch of dialogue, but the impactful stuff is that King Khan tells Jabari that he has to give up his knighthood and tells him to go back to the fishing village. Jabari doesn't like this, but understands that it's the king's orders. We'll later find out that King Khan is only doing this to protect Jabari because he's his best friend and he doesn't want anything to happen to him. Once Jabari leaves the throne room, King Khan tells us that his kingdom will help us with the battle against Balhalt. This makes a lot of sense that they would help because Khan now has an emotional attachment. When we're leaving, we call Varys and let him know that they have agreed to help us, and he tells us to come back to Alfard to meet with him. We meet back up with Varys, and we find out that the next target area is called Sadasu, and it looks like the Empire has already began convincing the leader of this area. So we have to hurry up and try to convince him to help us and not Balhalt. We find out that the Lord of Sadasu is away, and the man that is in charge now might not be on our side. His name is Rodolfo, and Varys wants to know what our spirit thinks of him before we either know him or meet him at all. It's an interesting thing to ask someone, but what do I know? Varys also tells us about the story of the War of the Gods. It's considered a legend, and people think it is some sort of tale that got passed down, but not very many people think it's even real. But Varys tells us that it is real and was recorded by the children of the earth, and it took place nearly 1,000 years ago. The story says that a wicked god by the name of Malpersio rebelled against the other gods to create the world in the image that he thought was right. He called forth a host of dark brethren and began to annihilate all the other gods, and the world fell into darkness. The ancestors of the children of the earth banded together and took down Malpersio to save the world. That's all the detail we get about the battle or fight itself. We do find out that the islands float because they have what is called End Magnus inside of them, which is actually part of Malpersio. The children of the earth decided to split Malpersio's remains into 5 End Magnus and put them into 5 continents. Once they did that, they severed those continents from the earth and set them to float in the sky using the remains of Malpersio's power. Then, Varus goes on to tell us that the rest of Malpersio was discarded around the world so that he couldn't be revived, and that the Umbras are those parts of Malpersio. The pieces of Malpersio eventually mix with people and creatures along the way, because without a living being, then the pieces have no power. But inside of something living, Malpersio's power can come to the surface and become Umbras. I think I covered everything from this part, and I hope you understand everything that was happening so far in the game. After all that, we can finally leave Alfard and go back to the best menu in the game and fly ourselves to Sadasu on the map. When we land in Sadasu, we find ourselves in Furcad, the ancient capital, and this city is very different than where we've been recently. This city is small and doesn't have much technology at all. The people seem like they're hardworking farmers and merchants. It does seem like a nice place to settle down and have a family though. I like that every place isn't something crazy and that these little towns still take place. When we get out of the ship, we notice that the Imperial soldiers are here already. So we decide that we need to stay under the radar and find Rodolfo in the town. When we get there, people don't want to talk to us at all, and we can't figure out why everyone is being so hostile towards us. But we find these wanted posters around the town of each one of our party members. And I found these to be super funny because they're way different than what we look like, and they make us sound like supervillains. If anyone has watched One Piece, this reminds me of Sanji when his wanted poster is of someone else, and people don't think it's him when he's with the Straw Hats. It always made me laugh. Anyways, we have to go around and take down all the wanted posters in the town so that we don't cause any more problems. After taking down all the posters, we make our way to the top of the town, where Rodolfo's estate is, and we see that Giacomo is outside trying to get inside. But the guards tell him that Rodolfo isn't there, but in a small farming village outside of the town, so we don't have to fight Giacomo yet, and we need to head out of the village to the south. The dungeon in this area is called Nunki Valley, and it reminds me of like a rocky mountain forest or something. There are trees on the outside of this river that cuts through, and there are rocks at different heights on each side of the river. I don't think it's really the best design for a new dungeon, but I think it's simple and works for the area that we're in. The theme of this area, to make it different, is that we have to collect this dew called honey droplets on the rocks to get these fireflies to move out of the way so that we can get past specific areas. We're going to speed through this area because nothing really happens in the valley for right now. We get through it and find ourselves in a small farming village at the bottom of the island called the farming hamlet of Sabure. And when we walk inside, we notice that Hughes is there with someone, which we think is Rodolfo. We find out that Rodolfo is siding with the Empire because of money. It seems like the sole reason that he's willing to work with them. It makes the man sound horrible, and I'm not a fan of him already. Could he be the first person that won't agree to work with us? The Empire just wants to come into the area and promulgate Sadasu, which is their overall goal anyways. Soggy busts into the area where Rodolfo and Hughes are talking about their agreement, and Soggy tells Rodolfo he can't trust the Empire and he needs to not work with them. Rodolfo calls us a village boy that will get punished later. Hughes knows who we are, but just walks away and tells Rodolfo to follow him. Soggy and friends decide that they're going to try again at his estate to get him to join. And if they can't get inside, that they'll use force this time. So we decide to head back to the estate. Using force is exactly what we do when we arrive. We push through the guards and then run through the front door. We know that they're going to chase us, so we decide to take them out in the lobby before they push us into even more guards. I went really fast in this area because it's a lot of fighting guards and jumping from one room to another room, using the windows and stuff like that. It's nothing all that great, but the idea is to smoke out the end of the hallway so that we can get up the stairs to the main room of the manor. After getting special chemicals, we can add them to this furnace-like thing to do that. Run by a guard and go up the stairs. This leads us to our third encounter with Giacomo. Giacomo at this point has lost it because he's obsessed with the idea of taking Soggy down. He's lost his position with the Empire, and when he thought all was lost, we show up on the stairs for another fight. Taking us down is his way back into good favor with the Empire, so we have to fight him for the third time. This fight is very much like the second fight. It's him with 2 soldiers, but this time it's pretty easy. I think that we're higher leveled now and have better attacks and equipment. The fight sort of just happened, and we're able to take him down on our first try this time. We have always died at least once when fighting him in the past, but this time we didn't have any problems and just took him out. Once we get out of the battle, Giacomo is upset that he's lost to us again, and goes on about how he just wants power, overwhelming power, and then passes out on the floor. I don't think he's dead because they don't seem to indicate that he is, but I could be wrong about that. Soggy talks about how he feels sorry for him, or maybe envies him. Then we head into the room where Rodolfo is hanging out. Rodolfo finally believes us that Vera sent us there and even talks to him on our cell phone thing. Then we talk about how he doesn't want to help the Empire, but he's padding his pockets with gold, and then he's going to kick them out of Sadal Su. But when he's telling us about this, Hughes walks in and hears all of it. So now Hughes knows not to trust him, but says they're going to start pro-machination with or without him, and tell Soggy to come to Nunki Valley, and then he leaves. We decide that we do need to follow him, and when we get to Nunki Valley, it's very different. They have brought in machines and building materials, the forest is all on fire, and they're just destroying the area for no real reason. This time, going through the area, we have to cool off the cranes so that we can use them to get past the fire and up to new sections of the area. It's pretty simple and nothing really happens besides we're fighting guards this time. We get access to a brand new area and take this pathway through the trees to get to a clearing where they're using flamethrowers to burn away the trees, and Hughes is waiting for us to get there. He's the cockiest of all the villains so far in this game because he thinks he can't be touched. He tells us that he's getting rid of the forest and then tells one of his guards to get his paramachina. Then tells Soggy to shut up. He'll have his chance to fight him. Then he says right now, and an airship drops his paramachina down to him. His is very small, and it's just a cannon thing that goes over his arm. It seems like it wouldn't really do anything, but is very powerful. I like this a lot because he's so cocky that it makes sense that he wouldn't want to have this giant machine or anything. He thinks that he can handle it all himself with very little help. I don't know if I'm overthinking this here, but I like that idea. This fight goes exactly like how you think it would go. Hughes wipes the floor with us, and it's supposed to be that way. The idea of this fight is to heal often and just do enough to trigger the ultimate attack to end the fight. It's pretty easy, but he can take your party down with little problem. Once the fight is over, we're crouched on the ground, and instead of taking us out, Hughes is in no hurry and walks away from us. Soggy gets everyone back up to fight him again. Then Shanath comes into the screen and asks what's taking so long. Shanath notices that we're over there and basically just yells at us to leave Hughes alone and decides that he has a surprise that will take us out. We go into a battle, but we don't know what we're about to fight. When the fight screen loads, in drops this massive rat-looking thing that we find out is actually another Umbra. This one is different because it's attached itself to a creature in the forest and not a human, like all the other ones. Maybe this one's a bit weaker because of that. This fight is easy, and usually we can't do much to the Umbra in the way of fighting them and taking them out, but this time we can hit this one super hard and actually kill it in the process. It's like most boss fights in this game, chain some good combos and stay healthy, and you'll have no problems with this fight. If you notice during the last 2 fights, we now have a card in our deck that shows us how much health the enemy has remaining by using a bar on the bottom of the screen. This is such a nice addition because you can make a strategy at the end of a fight to go all out on an enemy to take it out for good if you know that they're weak. So I really like this card. Anyways, after the fight, Gilo is ready to kill this thing and is telling Soggy to hang on, it's almost over. But because of the distraction of this, the Umbra hits Gilo out of the way and ends up getting a hold of Millie in its mouth by her leg of all places. Soggy is actually who steps up in this moment and runs in to save Millie. He uses a sword and with one final slash is able to kill the Umbra, but not before it throws Millie into the air behind it. Once the creature is dead, Soggy heads over to Millie to make sure she is okay, which she is, and then she asks him how he's doing, and he's like, I'm doing good, just a little headache, nothing crazy. Then it all hits him at once, and he falls to the ground and passes out. Which means it's everyone's favorite pastime, recap time with Soggy gets a headache. Ding! When we arrive in the other world, we're all walking out of Wiseman's manor, and obviously we're not able to win the fight against him. The party knows that they don't have the power to fight Wiseman, and don't know if they should just throw the towel in. But Seth tells the group that they need to go back to Naus and think of another plan to deal with them. Everyone agrees and we make our way back to Naus. When we arrive, we notice that there isn't anyone greeting us at the top of the ship, which is unusual, and even after Thoron yells, we don't get any sort of response. When we head down into the ship, we find a bunch of people laying on the ground, and most of them seem to be dead. Quiss is laying in the middle of the hallway, and she's still alive. Seth asks what happened, and she tells him that Wiseman came there and tried to turn everyone into Magnus. If you resisted, then he would kill you. The villagers tried to fight him off, but they were not strong enough, and with those final words, Quiss dies in the arm of Seth. Then the screen turns black, and we end up in the office room where all the meetings usually take place. Thorin wants to get revenge and wants to fight Wiseman again. Even if he dies, he wants revenge. But Seth tells him to wait. Actually, more like yells at him to wait, and then tells the group that they're going to Zarak. But no one explains what it is or anything. But most of them seem like it's not a good idea to go there. I'm not sure why, because they don't really go into detail. Seth tells us to meet him outside when we're ready to leave. I think Seth could be a good leader, but overall he seems to make rash, irresponsible decisions that's causing the people around him to get hurt. So let's hope this ends up being a good idea. We arrive to Zarak, and I don't know how to explain this area. It's darkness and evil, but it sort of seems like the rocks are molten or something. I would assume this design is meant to make it seem like we're heading to like hell or something, but it's called Zorak the Brethren's Keep, and from the story that Varys told us, Malpercio used the Brethrens to take out the gods in the world. So are we coming here to make the same deal? Yet again, I didn't notice this during my playthrough, but noticed it during editing that it was called this. I don't know how I missed it, but it's pointing us in a certain direction now. The theme of this area is that we have these big massive holes in the walls that act like a door, but they only open when light is shined onto them. So we have to go around the area and get the center light source so that we can open and close doors. I didn't know how to do this for so long, but you can take light magnets from the light source, and it was only letting me do that at first. But at the right side and angle, you can get Soggy to turn the light source, allowing for us to open and close doors to advance into the dungeon. Outside of that, this area isn't that interesting in my opinion. When we get to the final large door that we need to get to in the area, the party has a conversation where Thorin asks who would live in an area like this, but is met with resistance and is told to just walk through the door and keep quiet. This is very sketchy behavior from Seth, and I would be questioning him a lot more than this party does. Before we're able to walk through the door, Soggy gets another headache and we pass out again. Everyone's favorite pastime, Soggy gets a headache and we get a recap. Ding! Once we come to back in Soggy's world, Hughes is standing over the dead Umbra and we're sort of crouched off to the side because we have been passed out for who knows how long. I do have that question though. When we pass out, how long are we passed out for? Because usually when we come back to, not a whole lot has taken place. So it makes it seem like we've passed out for just a minute or two, but those parts usually take a bit. So am I to believe that all that takes place in the matter of minutes before we come back to? Let me know down in the comments below. Anyways, Hughes says it's time to end this now and goes to attack us as we're just crouched on the ground. But during his attack, Pololo shows up and blocks it. I don't know how he knew where we were, but this was clutch for him to appear and save our lives. He gives us time to retreat out of the area, and then he wastes time in there telling them that he won't turn us over to them. Then he teleports away from Hughes, talks to Shanath for a second, and then he teleports out of the area himself. He meets up with us at the beginning of Nunki Valley and asks us if we always put ourselves in danger, which we just respond with thanking him for saving us. It's a good, playful moment that was actually very serious, because Soggy moments later talks about how we could have all been dead if he would have shown up even a few seconds later. We decide to call Varys and report everything back to him. Tell him we lost to Dasu, and he's like, good work, I have another mission for you. Come back to Alfard. Gilo makes a comment about this, and it's like, I almost died, and he says good work. I love the party in this game. They have such great personalities. We go back to Alfard and meet with Varys, and he tells us there's one more continent called Anoe, and we need to find out what their leader's stance on pro-machination is. We accept this mission, and before we can leave, we're given another 8 blank magnets in order to be able to hold even more items. I always love getting more of these. Anyways, that's where we're going to stop this time. Let me know how you're liking this game so far down in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video. See ya!